I mean, why would you do this if you don't have this intense love for theater and this part just having the opportunity to dialogue with it in a way? I find I'm not really thinking so much about who's reading me when I'm writing it, but I'm thinking about what I'm myself dialoguing internally and trying to make it make sense and hopefully it communicates outward. But it's a love affair with theater. I mean, otherwise, why bother doing this?
I think that's true. I think it's about a conversation with the reader, the same kind of conversation you would have if you were leaving the performance space with a bunch of people who had a little time on their hands and wanted to talk about what they saw. I really feel like I try to start a conversation and maybe add to it, as I guess Harvey was saying, some of the things that I know from my background and how much I've seen that maybe an enlightened theatergoer might not see but might find food for thought. I think that's an honorable role, and I think it serves its purpose in all the different aspects of the art form, but we're not responsible for anything beyond that, I don't think.
Yes?
Well, there is something else. You know, I speak to a lot of people who work in the theater, actors, you know, directors, press agents, and everybody sees a play. These are people who are not critics. Everyone sees a play from their own point of view. Mm-hmm. Playwrights usually can hate a great production simply because they hate the play. You know, and one of the responsibilities of a reviewer is that you have got to be able to be objective enough to see what's working here, what's working there, what the director has done, what the playwright has done, how the actors are contributing, how a set contributes to a play. That becomes important because most people just kind of go to the theater and have a good experience or a bad experience, and it's based primarily on what their own reference is. And I don't know why I brought that up.
Well, I mean, one of the things I like about critics who are consistent and stuff is that you begin to build a relationship with them. And if they're consistent and honest, I almost want to know what, for instance, all of you, if I see a show, I'm like, I wonder what these guys thought of that same thing, you know, and I love that sort of thing, and I know what, you know, I read a lot of reviews. What we do at Bear 11, I read hundreds of reviews a year now, and so I kind of feel like I know all of you guys, even though I don't, but I like that. I like that relationship, and I think that's something that you project out into, you know, the theater community. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Once again, if you want to text any questions up here, anyone live streaming, the number is 323-253-3887. Since we're doing all this fancy schmancy technology stuff, let's move on to our next question. So, as journalism continues to evolve from print to electronic mediums, here comes this question. How does one draw the line between a casual blogger and an established writer? And similarly, how do you feel that we can cultivate and nurture future generations of theater reviewers / critics in light of these changes? I'd like to start with Rebecca because of your recent degree that you received. If you could start us off.
Yeah, it's a question that, you know, keeps coming up, like the line between, you know, I guess authority is the question here. You know, what the voice that you speak, is it one from, you know, a position of authority, and what are your credentials to be getting a review? And I don't know, I still value people who, you know, especially lots of these guys who've been doing this for a really long time and have the breadth of experience to actually speak on it because they've seen so much and they've studied this, as opposed to someone who's, you know, an armchair critic, because that's kind of what we all are. I could, you know, tell you what I think about a film, but does that make me, you know, Karina Longworth? No. Does that, I mean, I think that people still look, you know, you may check Yelp, but if you really want to read a fully informed opinion, you know, you want to read Jonathan Gold. You may take your friends' opinions, and those are valid because they understand you, they know what you like, but there's something, I mean, and of course I'm biased on this too because I don't want criticism to die and that to, you know, but Yeah, for me, it's still that there's the voice of authority in people who have experience and who are trained, as opposed to just someone who likes it.
Mm. But
Just because
arguably,
you like something doesn't mean you can't do it well, you know. But
that a lot of people that are going to be growing up and being the next generation of writers are starting within the electronic form. Yes?
I get the most extraordinary press release this week from the company that puts the musicals in and out of the Pantages on a regular basis. And for Shrek, which they're opening sometime this month, they offered this rather interesting opportunity that if you wanted to, you could live blog the opening night. They were going to set apart a section of the audience, and you could, I guess for $15, sit in that audience and do this while you were watching the show. And I think that's an interesting experience in terms of communicating to your friends outside, but you're not watching the show. And I'm wondering at what point this just descends into absolute absurdity.
Well, it's interesting because I actually made it to one of the TCG lectures or whatever. It was about the changing audience. And one of the things that was Doug McLennan, I think is who it was.
Yeah.
He said the difference in the audience that's coming up now is that they're not satisfied with their entertainment until they can share it. So they want to be participants in the art in a way, and also that the younger audience, they don't. And this is what you were talking about. Like, you don't want to lose that wonderful, real criticism that creates context and history and all this stuff. But the younger audience looks to their peers for, you know, what did you think of this movie? Should I go see this movie? Check on Facebook, check on Yelp, check on these things, and that's where it is. So, you know, and then you can talk about this, and they were talking about how you can, you know, and then when you come in a theater, it's like no cameras, no recording, no phones, no talking, and so it's
Until now.
Right.
Now we want you to do this.
But so how do you meld those things? And I don't know if you, without sullying what theater is, right? As being present in a
Well,
lot
film
of-
criticism at one point was like theater criticism, and then it just went viral. I mean, if you look at the number of criticisms that goes into a Rotten Tomatoes, it's hundreds and hundreds of people, and there's been enough scandals about those critiques being purchased, you know, by giving access to, from people to celebrities, or actually putting them on junkets and things like that. So this may be, in a way, the death knell of the theater critic is having actually any power. That's probably true already almost anywhere but New York. Maybe. I don't think we can close shows like we used to. There was a time when I worked for Dan Sullivan, and he could close a show like that. Chose not to usually, but he could. That was the power of the LA Times in those days. I don't think it has that power anymore. But perhaps the audience participation model, blogging model, simply doesn't mean it's the end of us, but it certainly means the end of this as having that kind of power, which is not necessarily a bad thing.
Yes, Tony?
Well, it's a very complicated issue because, first of all, we're dealing with print still having much more strength as far as what people want to use to pull quotes and
Yes.
the strength of a show. Very rarely do I see stage and cinema quoted. Even if it's a good quote, they usually go to the Times or something like that. So I think as we move into the blogosphere, it's going to spread out those opinions too. At TCG, there was a futurist, Mr. Houle, who said and proved in a chart that audiences don't know what they want. Indeed, David Merrick knew that.
Yeah.
And so David Merrick, the famous producer in New York, told audiences what they want. But now we're having audiences tell audiences what they want. And so what's happening with the Fringe now is a perfect example of my fear of letting audiences have the say. Well, I have seen one show that did not get 5 stars out of 200 shows. And that was my one review for that show. So what's happening is friends, family, even people I know, critics who have seen the shows say, well, I don't